Welcome to the Get Offset podcast. My name is Emily.
And I'm Jonah Hart.
And we're here today with our friend and fellow YouTuber, bass sensation, Hondo Felder.
Hondo.
Hey, Hondo, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. It's going great.
Your arm's in a sling.
It is, yeah. I apparently need to take a break from using the keyboard and playing bass so much. So I'm putting this in the sling and giving it a rest for 5 weeks. So I'm not looking
5? Well, that's not so bad. I've had to take breaks from walking basically for longer than that.
Well, hopefully we'll be back to play soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I'm definitely missing it for sure.
Definitely start doing some stretches. We're at the age where we need to
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
do some non-static stretching. Static stretching. Remember, friends, static stretching before you work out can result in injury.
Indeed. Very true.
Yeah. You want to be limber. So do those torso twists. Do the arm circles. I'm just going over my boxing.
There you go. Just keep swimming.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Keep swimming.
So guys, I got a question. Is playing guitar a cult?
Depends.
Maybe.
It depends. A hobby is kind of art. Can be kind of cultish, I guess.
Hobbies can absolutely be cultish. You think about like the cult of CrossFit and the cult of like Soul Cycle.
Yeah.
Those are specific organizations where the participants within those organizations get so into it becomes like this community.
Yep.
And sometimes things get weird. Guitar is not quite that centralized, but there are still things about it that seem really culty. Like we have specific lingo, for example. There are things that we know about that no one else does.
Yep.
Yeah, you talk to people and it's like wah 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 wah, and we're like, you don't understand. Like this is common knowledge. Why don't you know this?
Yeah, every guitarist who ever picks up a guitar and plays the D chord does all the sustain kind of add-nine things, all the like each time. But yeah, I mean that isn't really what makes something a cult. We're not saying that playing guitar is a cult, but I did ask people, Joe and I both did, what parts of guitar culture do you find a little bit culty? And yeah, again, I want to preface this. Guitar is not a cult. None of these things are really cults. And frankly, some of the answers were more like, here's stuff I don't like about guitar culture or things I don't specifically agree with. I'm like, not liking something doesn't make it culty.
You failed the assignment.
You had one job.
Yeah. But there's a Cult Education Institute, and here are some of the things that they use to define a cult. They're characterized by 1, absolute authoritarianism without accountability, 0 tolerance for criticism or questions, lack of meaningful financial disclosure, unreasonable fears about the outside world that often involve evil conspiracies and persecutions. There's more, don't worry. A belief that former followers are always wrong for leaving and there's never a legitimate reason for anyone else to leave, like guitarist going synthy. Abuse of members. We abuse each other. Records, books, articles, or programs documenting the abuses of the leader. No, it doesn't really apply so much.
I'm hearing some things that apply for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a few more. The biggest one is followers feeling they are never able to be good enough.
Yes.
A belief the leader is right at all times. Again, there's not really a central leader, but there are a lot of cults of personality in the guitar world.
The know-it-all.
A lot of cults of personality. And we'll get to that. I think that might be one of the first ones. And a belief that the leader is the exclusive means of knowing truth or giving validation. And that's a bit of we can get the cults of personality a little bit. So those are the kind of big things about cults. There are also sometimes entrance and exit costs. Guitar doesn't, I don't know if guitar has like specific, like their entrance costs, like literal monetary ones.
There's no exit. You're more selling things off.
Yeah, exactly. So those are some of the things that the CEI considers to be a cult. The Atlantic also had a few things from several years ago, the founder of IHOP, Mark Bickle, created a list of 7 ways to recognize the difference between a religious community and a cult. Opposing critical thinking.
Can't have that.
Again, isolating members and penalizing them for leaving. And then some of them are, the rest seem to be like actually religious specific. But like opposing critical thinking, I felt like we should add that one to
critical
the list
thinking
of things
bad. You must believe whatever the leader has said.
Yeah. So those are some things we're going to keep in mind as we talk about are certain parts of guitar culture culty. And big hat tip to the podcast Sounds Like a Cult and the book Cultish, and hat tip to Hillary B. Jones for turning me on to the book Cultish.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Very cool indeed. Yeah. So again, Joe and I put out a call to ask people what are some things in guitar culture that are kind of culty, and let's just dive in.
Yeah. So
cool.
I guess I'll go down the list first, or do you want to do one at a time? Just go
Let's
down.
do one at a time.
All right, so the first one that I saw there was a consensus about amongst the people in their replies was brand loyalty and people that are tone chasers. You think about Eddie Van Halen, John Mayer, John Bonanza. I mean, I know there's a proper way of saying it, but I always call him Bonanza.
I used to like Joe Bonamassa a lot
There you go.
when I was little.
That's how you say it.
Yeah, so that's kind of so let's just say that one more time. Let's say it one more time. Tone chasers?
Yeah, tone chasers.
Is it called a personality or tone chasers?
I would say tone chasers, like you're looking for the style of like effects that, let's say, Eddie Van Halen used, John Mayer, but very much a brand loyalty. Like, let's say also that's the kind they use, like Strymon, or kinds of brands of MXR, like EHX.
I would kind of divide those into two separate things. I think brand loyalty and like hero worship are kind of separate things.
Okay.
Starting with brand loyalty, yeah. So brand loyalty is always an interesting one for me. I can't imagine like standing a brand as much as some people tend to just really defend everything a brand will do.
They can do no wrong.
Yep, they can do no wrong, and if you speak against them, oh my God, they will pile on you and hop the train.
I mean, I've had that experience in guitar groups that were dedicated to certain guitar pedal brands that I won't get into.
No.
But I think something about guitar culture that makes this almost easier to like stan brands and start like a cult of personality around a brand is that so often pedal builders, especially, and some luthiers, they become the brand, and it's kind of you can't separate them.
Right.
At all. And that's one of the reasons they got big, is because they were so available, especially early on. And it's not always a bad thing. It's actually, I think, a pretty good marketing strategy. And it's nice to be able to reach out like personally to people whose gear that you use. People tend to really like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Having that connection is a huge thing for people.
Yeah. Just ones that come off the top of my head. I think JHS is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, I agree.
And JHS always has a lot of defenders. Every time someone speaks up against JHS, someone is really quick to come to the brand's defense, even if it's, kind of a reasonable criticism.
Right.
Or just an observation. Even like, a lot of their circuits are clones. Everybody does clones. How do you? I'm like, that's just a fact. But the JHS also leans into it. Yeah. They specifically have pedals like they are clones.
Yeah, they're like, we do this.
Yeah, but that is something. That's just one example of people really getting into it with each other because of this intense brand loyalty.
Yes.
What are some other examples that you guys can think of?
Well, I'll definitely think another one I'd say is probably Strymon has a huge kind of, like there's a lot of people that, as far as like when they're talking about praise and worship boards, even though I'm not really in that, but if you have a board that has quite a few, Strymons on it, like you're automatically associated, and people who are into Strymon are definitely very much into that kind of sound. So a lot of times you'll see someone definitely defending the brand or anyone's opinion about said things in regards to them still being something you should have on your board. I mean, I saw a conversation recently that was someone was asking, I think, in one of the Reddits that was saying, well, I want to get a new reverb, but the Big Sky or any of those hasn't been updated since 2014. So maybe I could find something new. But I was like, well, in 2014, I guess I'll be the Strymon fangirl to kind of argue the point of, if they are still on people's boards on stage and still being used in production in studios, it doesn't matter whether it's 2014 or 2022. I mean,
Right.
It's still viable that they're still being used, so therefore they're still good to use modernly.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So I would be one of those defenders, but I really don't care. If it gets the job done, great. But I do love that brand. So
Yeah, that kind of goes into almost another culty part of the guitar culture, which is just straight up, let's be honest, praise and worship
yes,
pedal boards.
that is another
specifically. Because you look at the praise and worship community in terms of guitar, just about guitar gear culture, it's like a lot of those folk wear the same kind of shoes. They have the same kind of pedals on their boards. They play
All
the same
pedals, yes.
guitar builders. They have the same pickups. It really is like a uniformity thing. And I mean, that's not really one of the tenets that we've talked about, but that is, I think, a big thing is something cultish, is something culty. Like you think about mid-level marketing, that's like people selling like LuLaRoe and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And people make fun of how they always have like the same scripts and they have the same aesthetic and they kind of do everything the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part of what makes something culty. You think about when you think of cults, how often are you thinking of people all wearing the same thing, like the Polyphonic Spree, if you remember that band?
Oh God, yes.
Kind of a lot.
Yeah.
So that I think kind of bleeds into not just even brand worship, but like some genres and styles, specifically praise and worship. They seem pretty a little, let's be honest, a little culty.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a similar thing in the bass world right now going on with companies like Dark Glass. It's like, there's like very heavy, like, if you play metal, you got to have a Dark Glass pedal on your board.
Dark Glass, yep.
And you got to have Dark Glass and play a Dingwall. It's like everybody's like going down that route. And it's funny because when you're talking about like the cult aspect, I feel like you'll have like a development of like this cultish type group, and then you'll have like a rebound group that's like all anti that thing.
Yes.
So it's just like you got this whole group of huge fans of this thing, and everybody's like, oh, I'll use anything but that.
Yeah.
So I find
that's a good point,
yeah.
man.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. Yeah, so I think brand worship can get pretty culty. I think we can agree on that. And that it really goes into the cult of personality and hero worship, especially in regards to specific players. John Mayer, Joe Bonamassa, Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Slash.
There are a lot of guitarists who can seemingly do no wrong. Joe Bonamassa is kind of an interesting one because he's got more backlash than a lot of the other players that we would otherwise mention in that list, which is weird. It's weird, isn't it? How he seems to have more backlash than like John Mayer. John Mayer actually does some rude things sometimes. He's very funny, but he also has done some really shitty things.
True. I mean, for me, it's probably more his advertising and marketing campaigns of bombarding my email with nonstop.
Oh, get off that email list.
Yeah, like every 2 seconds he's doing something, and I'm just like, just stop. I don't care. Please leave me alone.
Are his emails better than they used to be? Because they used to just be really long.
Yeah.
Like just a bunch of just like image blocks that somebody made and just pasted into an email.
Yep. That's what it was.
Like,
so anytime I'd see that, I would just like, oh my God, unsubscribe. Please leave me alone.
Yeah. People really do, especially when you get into older guitarists. Hendrix, especially ones who are no longer with us even or playing.
R.I.P.
Ones that can't rebound, like they can't change or they can't like suddenly offend people, I guess.
Yeah.
Like people thinking that Jimi Hendrix is like the peak of all things guitar. Very influential, fantastic player, inspired my personal style in some small ways because his style influenced a lot of the guitarists I listen to styles.
Right.
Like John Frusciante from the Chili Peppers like that kind of stuff. But there does seem to get some weird hero worship around it. People having like a ton of Jimi Hendrix memorabilia,
every fuzz
just
face
pointing to him
imaginable.
as, putting his face, his name, his likeness on, or like hinting at it with like so much gear.
Yeah.
And it's like some of it's licensed and on the up and up. Some of it's really not. That does get kind of culty.
Yeah.
But that's celebrity worship, and that's its own kind of cult.
Yeah,
no, it totally is.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, there's a couple of people like that I can think of in the bass world. When you think about people like Flea or Jocko,
Jocko.
there's some people that are just hardcore. They want to do everything that person did.
Yep.
They want to have the 1960s style jazz bass that's relict and fretless with the lines in it, just like Jocko did and everything. I always find that interesting, and it's funny because when you think about the type of people that get the hero worship, they were big originators for the most part, but then the people that are worshiping them are like doing the opposite.
It's like what Joe said, just tone chasers.
No, exactly. Yeah, like even like when I had my fretless bass that I eventually sold, like when I was getting into, playing one of those, it was everywhere you looked, left and right, Jocko, Jocko, Jocko. And it was just like, well, I mean, what else are people doing? That was more me. Like I usually am not really a traditionalist or like putting people on pedestals. So I'm like, that's nice and all, but like, what are other people doing with this?
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to emulate a certain guitarist or style, especially if that's just what you want to do. If you just want to go play Jimi Hendrix songs and sound like Jimi Hendrix, awesome. Yep. That's a really valid way to enjoy the art of guitar. But when you get to a point where everything sucks except for that thing that you like, that's where it gets a little culty, because that's zero tolerance for criticism or questions.
Yeah, not
you
open-minded.
Can't criticize. Yeah, you can't criticize these people, especially the ones who are no longer with us. Like, trying to see what else might appeal to that. A belief that leader is right all the time for the celebrity culture. That's a good one. No accountability. I hope things don't get into that way. I do think that there are some people out there who might be part of this culture who are abusers. And maybe it's come out and maybe it hasn't, but it would kind of operating without this accountability. I hear rumors all the time of people saying, oh, this person's being protected, but this person's actually done these terrible things.
Yeah, I mean,
we're just not, we're not able to talk about it, allegedly kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, you'll think about this also, how people worship, like, let's say the Beatles, and that in some aspects would have kind of a following that would lean into some of this. But I mean, if you think about John Lennon, I mean, as far as like a musician, hey, great, but as a person, like highly abusive.
Maybe not so great.
Yeah, not so great.
Yeah,
so,
allegedly.
But he can do no wrong.
I think more than allegedly. I think he admitted to abusing his first wife.
Yeah.
And then we know that there are rock stars, like there are rumors about things that Jimmy Page has done. And then there are obvious things that people like Jimmy Page have like admitted to doing, especially in the 70s with like young groupies and stuff like that, things that don't quite fly these days. Like, I think that would ruin your career now.
If it
came
for
out.
sure.
Now, for sure. And I've seen someone, this person is also problematic in a way. If I think about some of the things I guess Amanda Palmer has said, that all of our heroes are problematic in one way or another, and it's really as us
especially
people.
Her.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I said that. As people, it's really up to us to decide what we're willing to accept and not. Like, so.
Yeah. And that's interesting. Because people always want to separate the art from the artist. I don't think that's always possible.
No.
I agree.
You can't on some. Yeah.
And I just, especially considering there's so much great art out there and some art to consume, products to buy from people who aren't abusive of power. People who can handle it better. Yeah. Like they're like, oh, every celebrity's done something. not the same level of something. Like you're like, oh, maybe so and so was rude to a fan. I'm like, oh, who gives a shit?
Yeah, they had a bad day. Like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, like, I don't think the weight of the world should be on that one interaction. Like, you have no idea the context of that moment.
No, and like I try to be really nice even when I'm in a bad space or mood. Like that gig where I fucked up really bad a few weeks ago on one song. After that song, I got off stage because it was intermission, and a guy came up to me to wanted to talk to me about my guitar. And I was trying so hard to be nice, but I know I was being a little bit short. I'm like, you picked me at a wrong time. Like I don't know. Also, in general, I don't like being talked to the moment I get off stage because I'm trying to do something. Like go to the bathroom.
Important things.
So those are two big things. I think those are probably the two biggest parts of guitar culture that I think that we can actually say can get really culty. Yeah. And again, not saying it's a real cult, not saying these people are cult leaders. And I'm not saying that just because you are someone who is, or like there's someone you hero worship. I'm not saying just because you hero worship them, they're bad.
No.
Like,
yeah, I mean,
people do it, but I think you have to keep your mind open and like say, if they do something shitty, I'm not going to stand for it.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the big difference and stuff like that.
No,
absolutely. And I think that, now that we're in this age of, everybody can find out so much about everyone so easily. I think, that accountability part is a little bit harder to ignore these days than it was maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah. And it's also up for us to decide, like you were saying, Joe, well, kind of like Amanda's quote. Yeah. It's up for us to decide, like, what's actually problematic and bad and what is, like, maybe not ideal.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, everybody does something sometime that's going to hurt somebody else. And I think, like, was it intentional? Like, I don't think intent really matters, like, if you really, really hurt somebody. But it can make it easier to forgive if you are willing to redeem yourself in some sort of way. And that's something we don't get. Like, I loved Ryan Adams. I know I've talked about this on the podcast before. Loved him. That New York Times article came out. I just pulled all the records off my shelf. Yeah. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Because the one line that haunted me from that article was she never played another show.
Oof.
And regarding one of the younger women with whom he spoke, sent illicit sexual pictures to, and convinced himself that she was older than 18. And she lied, like she did, but that's like, we could get, that could be its whole episode, but you gotta recognize power differentials.
Yeah, the dynamics for sure.
In events like that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's next? We've already spent 20 minutes.
The next on the list, tone woods or tone is in the fingers, like those types of
those things.
Those things.
Like, I feel like the science is kind of in on tone wood, like that it doesn't make the hugest difference, and especially in electric instruments.
Electrics, yes, I dove into a little of that, but I think it definitely does in acoustics.
Yeah, people have done studies on this. People have done studies on does the shape of a guitar change the sound, and the answer is kind of, but not noticeably.
Yeah, at least from what I saw in my looking into it with the electrics. In 2012, there was a guy from Matthew Angro from La Trobe University. He conducted an experiment with 7 guitars, obviously different woods and whatnot, but the pickups were all the same, the strings were all the same, and the distance of the strings were all across the board the same. So
same scale.
Yeah, same scale, same everything.
Okay.
So they basically, he did some tests in which he kind of played some notes and see the frequency of all of them straight across the board to see if there was any difference between all of them, between woods or anything, or is it just the pickups and electrical pieces really that matter? And it seemed, when he did the test, it looked like all of them right across the board there really was no difference, which kind of leaned into the fact that it has to do with, if they're all the way they're set up. I mean, or the electrics or the distance, like that's really what matters and not really the tone wood. But I would kind of, I guess as a question to say, I don't know what pickups he was using, because if you're doing this test, are you just using a bunch of cheap pickups? I mean, that wouldn't pick up that kind of subtle difference, or that's the open-ended,
or like a low compression PAF, for example.
So it didn't tell me anywhere what style of pickups he used. So to me, as much as they say, yeah, science is kind of like ruled out on this one, I was like, yeah, but I mean, we
don't know a lot about that study.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I was like, I kind of want to know what the pickups were. Like, what did they use? Because if it is something that it's just cheap and it doesn't really pick up the frequency range as good as, let's say, something that is better at that, would we have different results in that study? So that's the kind of herring that I see in the study. But yeah,
at the same time, most guitarists do put their guitar through compressive effects, if not a compressor straight up, like overdrives, delays. By the time you get through all that, I got to imagine that it's not making the biggest difference in the world. But there are people who like, I don't want a guitar unless it's all solid body mahogany, rosewood fretboard, not Brazilian rosewood or any other pseudo kind of thing. So I want real ebony, not ebonized rosewood or something like that. They get really specific. And if you're saying you want these specific things because it's the only way you're going to get the tone that you want, like that, that's kind of culty.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's kind of culty.
Of the ones that you mentioned, across the board, when I was doing the research, that's mostly what I saw, either mahogany or ebony or rosewood. Everyone was up and down about those type, or like alder, being a little snappy or bright or purple wood or whatever. But I know in acoustics, obviously, it helps with projection or whatever. But in electrics, it's like, what really is operating here when you get down to it, after all the effects are added and compression, like you said, like, at the end of the day, like, it's going through so much and changing the signal dramatically to the point where it's, even if it did, the little bit of minor nuances are going to be lost in all of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you think, Hondo?
Yeah, I think kind of like picking up on what Joan was saying, I think by the time the sound gets to the audience, any nuance, any differences are probably long gone, because I've experienced a lot of times using even sometimes different pickups that can get lost sometimes, transferring between, you playing and hearing yourself versus what the audience might hear if you're playing at a gig or on a record. Because, once it gets to the mix engineer, it's like totally out of your hands and it ends up being a totally different thing anyway. And I think if there are differences, I've always thought, obviously the player kind of picking up on the tone is in the fingers thing, like the person playing the instrument obviously is the biggest difference. But then when you get into things like tone woods or like specific types of like strings or something like that, I think a lot of that is like how the instrument feels to you to play, as opposed to like what it really sounds like. You know what I mean? Because I think we can sometimes trick ourselves into hearing stuff because of the way it feels to play the instrument. You know what I mean? And not to say that
our own response.
Yeah, and not to say that that's not something that's important, because it's got to feel good to play to you in order for you to play the way you want to play. So it's like, does it matter tonally? Nah, probably not. But when you talk about like construction and stuff, I think it matters with like your experience of playing the guitar, maybe.
Yeah, and I think there can be some dangers in the cult of tone woods environmentally.
Yes.
And that's this whole other thing. But the idea of if we all agree collectively that a guitar only sounds good if it's ash, mahogany,
rosewood,
goodbye all ash trees.
Forget it. Goodbye trees.
I mean, it's but you can. I think like Layla from Tunatone has proven that you can get sustainably available materials to build a guitar, and it still looks great, sounds great, and frankly weighs less. And then composites, like Dan Electro using composites they have forever, lightweight, indestructible.
Yeah.
Like those things have benefits over using things like mahogany, not just environmentally, but in terms of like how long it's not going to smash very easily, and it weighs next to nothing. I'd rather have a lightweight guitar than a guitar made with an exotic wood just because.
Yep,
Yeah,
I agree.
I think it has magical properties.
No, I totally agree with you, because I mean, even when you think about not just woods, but thinking about other compounds, even though I don't like the sound of them, again, there's carbon fiber, type of instruments that are now coming out and people are using. So that's kind of a way to, I guess, conserve, not use certain woods when they're under sites and restricted. Because I know for a while rosewood was protected because charging people that did actually make instruments under rosewood for a bit. I think it's out of sites now, but it was for a couple of years.
At least it is for instruments. I think there have been some updates just in who can use it, because the big issue there was mostly furniture builders.
Yeah, especially with
rosewood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with rosewood especially was I think instruments weren't the issue. It was furniture builders. So I think that there is an exception for musical instruments now for rosewood, but I'm not entirely sure. Let me know in the comments on YouTube if I'm wrong. Before we get into Tonus and the Fingers, I want to implore you all to check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/getoffset. For as little as $5 a month, you can join our exclusive Discord server and hang out with some really cool people, including me, Joe, and Andrew. If you remember Andrew, he is pretty recent things. Hopefully you do. Good Lord. What else? So we got merch at getoffsetpodcast.com/shop. Please like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen/watch. And what else? Leave us a review on iTunes, please.
Of course, yeah. Leave reviews. Anytime we put up questions or anything on IG or anything, I mean, it kind of opens up the door for you guys to engage with us directly in any of these topics. I think that's really a good way for us to know what you think besides comments and reviews. And yeah, subscribe and join the Discord. I mean, it's a good community and I met lovely people there. So thanks for everyone supporting, and thanks for watching.
Yeah. And let's meet Hondo. We haven't really introduced Hondo very much except as a bassist and YouTuber. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. So I got into bass playing a little bit late. I started playing when I was 17. So now that means I've been playing for 21 years, almost 22 years. I started off playing classical guitar when I was 8, and I hated it. I started. They were at the time. I think I was listening to like a lot of rock and stuff, and they were making me play things like Autumn Leaves and Green Sleeves and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. So I did that for a couple of years, and then got out of it as quickly as possible. And I didn't do anything musical for a decade. And then I think I was listening to Incubus one day, like one of the first 2 Incubus records, and I was like, man, it sounds like this would be like really fun to do. Let me look into this. And I started just like looking into bass playing. And I got a 32-inch scale Washburn back in 2001, and then started playing bass. Yep, started playing then, and I had no idea that 32-inch scale was shorter than normal. So imagine my surprise when I pick up a P bass and I'm just like, "Whoa, this feels different."
Oh,
one of these things is not like the other.
I was like, "What's going on here?" But I've been doing that, and I've been doing that for 20 years, and I got into audio engineering and whatnot kind of early on in that process. So I've been doing a lot of like mixing and mastering and stuff. And then I started the YouTube channel, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. Because I'd actually moved. I'm from the East Coast. So I'm from Philadelphia. And I moved out to California back in 2015, and like I lost all my musical connections, so I wasn't really gigging very much. So I tried to figure out a way to like what could I do to like make myself write more music and make myself play more music. I figured like, okay, let me try and make a YouTube channel. And then that was 2 years ago, and I started off reviewing a bass that Jake Sarrican made for me, and the rest is online for you to see.
Yeah, so everyone please go check out Hondo, give him a follow, link in the video description as always.
No, of course. Thank you for everything you do. Because again, I've said in other podcasts, because we talk about you affectionately, I appreciate that there are, ways in which if anybody plays bass, you're kind of filling in the space of effects pedals, or ways in which we can hear how things sound. I always found that there was a lack of that when I first started playing bass myself. So just to have someone that's kind of filling that void and doing it in a really creative and great way. I love the different styles that you play in. So it's like a wide range. It's not just one.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
For sure. Yeah. So from a bassist perspective, is tone in the fingers?
Yeah, this conversation comes up so much. I think there's two different ways I think you could interpret that question. I think the first one, in the sense that, I think, well, let me ask this first. Do guitarists agree that different picks sound different?
They definitely feel different.
Different.
I think a really light pick is going to feel different and give you less effect than other things, and playing with your fingers is going to give you a different effect.
On acoustics,
but typically I think it matters more on acoustics for sure. Because again, with electric guitar, like your things are going through compression most of the time.
Yeah, I think,
even if you don't have a compressor.
Right. Yeah, very true. And I think, when it comes to that aspect, the difference in between using different types of picks is kind of like the difference between, use different people's fingers, because different people's fingers are shaped differently. Yeah. For instance, my fingernails, the very beginning of my fingernail is very far forward on the pad of my finger. So I get a lot more nail in my attack on the bass than somebody else who, they have thicker pads of their fingers, and their nail doesn't make contact with the strings. So that's actually, you can very clearly hear that. That's definitely, I think that's not an arguable fact that can make a difference, because it's it's like playing with a pick with fur on it versus an actual plastic pick. I think that definitely makes a difference. But I think there's the other aspect of the tone is in the fingers thing. I think people are saying, as a player, you're the person that's making the sounds. And I have heard a couple of my favorite bass players, like Janik Gwizdala, and I've heard him play now multiple basses made out of tons of different woods with different scale lengths made by different builders, and he always sounds the same. He always sounds like him, So I think there is something to that for sure.
Definitely in terms of styles, I think. When I think about electric guitar, especially, I think most of the tone really happens between you and the amp. Not saying completely, because there are things like technique that matter a lot. Left hand technique, right hand technique, where are you pressing? How hard are you pressing on the strings, which hopefully not too hard. How light are you on moving from note to note? Jordan.wave on Instagram, very smooth, fast player with a really light touch. And then you have players that are pretty heavy-handed, and you can hear the difference in what they're able to play.
Right.
But if you took away things and I keep saying compression, but I think it's one of the most important kind of elements. Obviously, no one's ever saying that you can get reverb delay and glitchy shit without effects. But you're not going to get the sound that you get without compression, without oftentimes post-production on things, on recordings, to give you that kind of sound. I mean, shit, your voice sounds so different depending on what effects, what EQ you have going on. And that's your voice. And your voice is here, and it's here. And that's it, or that seems like it should be it, but it's not the case. It's a lot of things working together. Yeah, and if you took someone's sick guitar run, or took some chicken picking and took away all of the effects, including the compression, and just went direct in with an amp sim, it would sound so different than what you would expect. And I feel having those different kinds of effects can give you a lot of confidence as a player that you otherwise might not have. So I think it starts in the fingers, but it can be transformed and almost always is.
Of
Except
course.
for acoustic players.
Yeah, no, I get that.
We always go back to acoustic players, don't we?
Yes, we do. But I also think when you think about effects and in regards to playing style and tone is in the fingers, you can have someone that's highly technical, which is great, but sometimes effects masks things that you probably could improve as a player. So yeah, that can hide definitely a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and we love and hate effects for that.
Yep, that's my thing. I both love and hate them for that.
Yeah, that's definitely it. It's funny. There's a thing in the bass world where people will often say like, "Oh, all you need is your bass and your amp. That's it. Like you don't need to use effects. Like why are you using all those effects?" So there's definitely definitely a lot of people that believe that.
Yep, there is in the guitar world too. Yes.
I mean, you think about people who just want to plug straight into a Marshall stack.
Yeah.
The list is long. That's its own pseudo cult.
Yes.
Well,
amps and was it tube amps and like solid state was its own category. So yes, amps definitely has its following.
Yeah, I think especially tube amps. There, it does seem to be a bit of a cult of tube amps. And I think I do think it's getting smaller just with how far solid state and plugins have come.
I agree.
But there are definitely still a lot of people who just don't think you can get good tone with a solid state amp. And like, I hate to break it to y'all, there's some shitty tube amps out there too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, there definitely is.
Yeah. And this one, like, it felt a little bit less culty and more just like a disagreement or like just a very strange, hard belief. But this and a lot of what these have in common is not a lot of tolerance for criticism or questions.
Right.
And I think what kind of makes something culty is when you know that most of the people you ask to like defend a belief in one of these areas can't probably give you a lot of stats to or stories even to cement it and prove it. Because a lot of it's not, none of the shit's provable.
It's subjective, really.
Yeah.
The other one, of course, if we're talking going from amps, and of course we talked about plugins a little bit earlier, but not really in depth. One of the categories was analog and digital effects. You think about pedals, that kind of thing. And also, I always see people in the comments saying, "Why are you fiddling with that when you can just do plugins?" So that's, the difference.
I know Emily Hopkins and Russ get that a lot.
Unfortunately, they do. It's annoying.
Like, plugins aren't as fun.
Nope.
They're very valuable and they're
valid in their own setting.
They can be kind of affordable. Some of them are stupid expensive, but some are really affordable. Just like pedals.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like they're just like the digital like computer form of pedals. Like some of them cost about the same. Like when I think about
or a shit ton more.
Yeah. So and also, at least for me, when it comes to the difference between, effects pedals and plugins, for me, I'm already on computers so damn much that it's like, why do I want to fiddle more and more time fiddling with things in a program or a DAW with I'm sure it sounds great, but I'm kind of trying to add some organic element of like knobs turning or physical aspect in choosing my sound versus just like algorithm knobs and things. Again, they're equatable about the same, but I don't want to look at a screen a lot of times too long.
And you can't take plugins with you very easily.
No, you can't. You have to get a laptop.
I don't want to run a show computer when I'm playing Connor Burn. That place is like a 250 cab. Yeah. That's stupid. But also it's just like so much stupid setup. And exactly. Things can go wrong. You can experience latency super duper easily. There are definitely benefits to having a show computer. But I just think you got to be in a bigger place to really justify it. And like you can't. I went to the park yesterday with headphones, a rechargeable Mission Engineering power supply, and my guitar, and like I had this little pedal board. I just dicked around in the park on for like 20 minutes. It was nice.
That's cool.
Video video is going to be on YouTube soon. If it's not already, it might be already. I don't know.
That kind of reminds me of Perry Frank. I used to early, I guess, in my exploration of like ambient kind of guitar stuff. I used to love watching his videos because he'd just have like a rug out and he'd be in the middle of like nowhere with just playing like ambient music out like in some kind of landscape. And I was like, I love that. So I look forward to seeing that. I love
that sounds
stuff.
cool.
Yeah. It was a fun little time. It was a little stressful. My camera battery. I forgot to check the camera battery because we just recorded with Recovery Effects the night before. And actually Rick was in charge of the camera and he didn't tell me the battery had gotten kind of low on it and I didn't check.
You had one job. Yeah. Poor guy.
I mean, I had a lot of jobs, and it wasn't really his problem. But yeah, we just recorded on iPhones instead.
It works.
I mean, and iPhones look great
They
anyway.
really do.
No, it's great.
I still filmed in 4K. It's just like I don't know why like we can't have smaller cameras that are 4K cameras when the iPhone can do it.
Yeah, it's portable. It's perfect.
Understand.
Yeah, it's valid as far as like recording. Anybody that says otherwise is just get off my lawn kind of mentality, which is gatekeeping. Yeah,
truly.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know. What's your take, Hondo, on because tube versus digital and analog versus digital pedals? They're all essentially analog versus digital. Yeah. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean,
Hondo?
I think there's a couple of different pieces, like the like modelers is one thing, and then you have like amp in a box pedals and stuff. And I think I kind of understood right when that technology kind of came out. I didn't think it sounded very good initially, but I think now, there's some really good stuff out there, and some of it makes playing out live so convenient. Like I used to have a Fractal AX8, the little pedal board, and when I was playing in a cover band, I could literally set up like every sound for every song and just click through it, and I just had all the effects I needed, all the amps, and it just made everything so easy. And to get all those same types of sounds, if I wanted to actually like go down the rabbit hole, it would have been like $50,000 a gear.
Gosh.
But I get all these cool sounds and cool effects, and I don't have to worry about like putting together a pedal board or anything like that.
Cheaper than a console. Yeah,
it's cheaper than
It can save you thousands. It can save you thousands of dollars touring with like a Kemper versus
and
tube amps.
Setup time, breakdown time, all that stuff. I think if you put them side by side, like I think you probably will hear and feel differences. But when it comes to like actually playing shows, or I think the real difference might be still when you're like recording, when you have like all that really high quality gear and you can like very finely hear things. I think like that's when if I have like a real amp sitting around, like I'm going to use it probably, but like for everyday stuff, the digital stuff is fine.
Yeah, and like you think about that Benson Mixwave Chimera app.
Oh, I love that
app. It's like $150 versus getting an actual Benson. There are people who work at Benson who can't hear the difference.
Yep,
it's amazing.
Yeah, I keep wanting to.
If I were recording, I'd probably still pick to use a real amp. But live, especially, I'm going to be completely honest. Tone quality doesn't matter as much live.
No.
It just doesn't. People aren't thinking about it as much. It's nice to have it sound as good as possible, but like I truly believe if you're just playing live, get it 80% of the way there and save yourself the stress because it takes like let's say an hour to get 80% of the way there, and then it takes like 3 hours to get that other 20%.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about it. Worry about it in the studio.
Of course, yeah. And when you think about studio-wise, digital versus analog effects, again, digital, when you think about even pedals, it's going to be something that's going to be highly replicatable. Like if you want a similar sound, it's always going to sound the same. Whereas you get analog, where there's always going to be nuances in the signal that's going to vary depending on your dynamics. Some people like that. I mean, to have a performance differentiate from time to time, and somebody are going to probably want more of a consistent kind of signal as far as whatever they're recording, if they are recording at home or they want that playing live, something consistent. But that's at least the difference with the analog and digital, of the difference of nuances in playing and getting replication.
Yeah, and I think that what a lot of these come down to is, in terms of is it culty or not, is are you part of a community where you think that your opinion is the only valid one?
Yeah.
And if it's a large community of people who think that their opinion is the only valid one, that's where it gets culty, and where they have you have certain phrases that your own kind of culty language. Yeah, that's where it gets kind of. That's where it crosses the line. I think that's really been the theme.
Yep.
And we don't have a lot of time left. The one that started this for me is the cult of stereo. Yeah. And I wish Ian was here to talk about it.
I am so guilty of that. You're gonna pick
me
that
too.
One.
Totally.
I'm recovering from the cult of stereo. I still love me some stereo effects.
Hi, I'm Emily.
Yeah. I like them, but I think it was Ian from Collector Emitter, and I'm really sorry if I'm misremembering who said this, but that I agreed with. Instead of having a stereo effect, in recording at least, I'd way rather double track guitar and pan hard left and right.
Yeah, I get you.
I mean, you can't get things like you can do the panning tremolo and in post-production pretty easily in terms of recording, and like the ping pong delay is like the one where like. But it's there. But when we talk about the cult of stereo, I think the big thing is the sheer amount of people who complain when a pedal isn't in stereo. Oh my god!
Yeah, that doesn't make
every pedal.
She's like, that's me.
It's every pedal. It's every pedal. Why does the habit have to be in? Why do you want the habit to be in stereo? Why do people want? Why does a little goes a long way in stereo?
I feel so attacked right now.
Good, I'm attacking you. Abusive members is number 6
I don't
on the CE
That's just for me.
No, it's when the people who start attacking builders, Chase Bliss does almost nothing in stereo. They made one stereo reverb, and now the Gen Loss is going to be in stereo. Yes. But people before those pedals would be like, "You released a overdrive and it's not in stereo." I'm like, how many are though?
Yeah, there's not really any.
One. I could the Montreal Assembly 2 Positive is in stereo. I love that thing, but
that sounded great. I remember.
Yeah, I mean, and it was $100.
No, the cost. I mean, that's why when you did that, I was just like, well, how much did it cost? Oh my god, $100. Normally,
I don't know why
any other pedals stereo cost a shit ton of more.
Mm-hmm.
I literally don't know why that video didn't do better. It's $100 stereo pedal, but and that's kind of the big thing. For me, it really is just people who complain that not everything's in stereo. Man, it takes so much more work to make a pedal stereo. I just know it. I just know it.
I know. I ask too much.
Ultimately, and a little stereo goes a long way. You don't how do you even, if you have a bunch of stereo pedals, how do you even make that not sound mushy? Okay, I have a stereo chorus that's going swish from swish to swish. I have a stereo ping pong delay that's going boing, 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 boing. And then I have a stereo tremolo that's going wah, 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 wah. If you're just listening, you are not getting the effect of my... I'm making hand motions for each one. And then you have a stereo reverb that's kind of going swish, 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 swish. And then you have a stereo amp cab where it's like Marshall Fender. It's it sounds so weird, dude.
What if you're trying to make good soup? Good soup.
You got a stew going.
But yeah, usually when it comes to stereo effects, anytime anybody has some kind of stereo pedal, I am literally here, give me, take my money. Yeah, Opla Noise Endeavors, their first stereo pedal, and they hit it out of the park on the first one. I mean, it doesn't mean, my first row, I have 2 rows on my pedal board. The first row is exclusively mono, so I haven't converted full stereo. At the very end, it goes stereo. I could do either or, but I much prefer hearing both sides. I love that effect of hearing both sides of the yeah, I know you could pan it left and right, but layering and doing more tracks is a little bit more work that I want to do sometimes.
It's just a little more work. It's
is.
just this much more work.
I'm already doing so much, Emily.
I truly think that doing hard pan double take just sounds bigger. But live, obviously, you can't do that. But if you are doing stereo live, like you have to have like a 2 amp rig, or
it's
you
more
have
expensive.
to have, if you're going direct, ask the sound guy to hard pan both sides, left, right, and the song is okay. All right, fine. Yeah,
I think it's different with bass. A lot of bass effects, because bass in a mix is so often just mono down the middle. Yeah, like you have so little wiggle room to do stereo when you're playing with a band. Like I think that's
normally
lost.
I agree with you.
Yeah, but if I'm sitting in here and I'm doing like ambient fun stuff, then I absolutely want to be in stereo.
Ambient exploration, yes.
Because you do synth stuff too, don't you?
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of synth stuff lately, and I tend to like my synth stuff to be in stereo too, but that's mostly because I'm a terrible synth player and I need it to sound cool on its own without any technique. So
synth almost makes more sense to me, because I don't think people are double tracking synths.
Yeah, I don't think people do that.
So. No, I have never seen that.
No, I don't think so. But like for guitar, I've seen people get mad when someone demoed a stereo pedal in mono.
Yes, I have seen that.
I'm like, okay, well, you gotta understand, like 85% of guitarists aren't
rigged for
recording in stereo, probably.
Nope, definitely not.
Like, it is, and that's part of what makes it culty, is because they're so aggressive, and it really is. Like, I'm sure, a lot of people appreciate stereo, but if we're being honest, most people don't have stereo setups.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%.
No, most don't.
I don't know what the math is.
So when you have someone angry in like the comment section, oh, this is a stereo pedal, you didn't do it like in stereo. Most of the people like are going to be playing this thing in mono if they get it. I mean, you're kind of playing towards your audience. And if there are demos in which they're playing in stereo, hey, great. Now we get to hear that. But not everybody's going to be able to kind of put the rig together or even direct to play to that kind of stereo system.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I think that's why I'm so grateful of the fact that there are a lot of demo artists, because each one is different. So we each get a different either playing style or different way of music in which they're playing. And that's why it's so great when you have people in comments say, no, you have to play this, where you have to do that. It's like, no, like there is something for everyone in all the channels. Like, I think it's great that we're all different, because then if someone's playing in mono, let's say, Ian or somebody else is doing some kind of like, stereo thing elsewhere, either Emily or Russ, or like either you, Emily, sometimes you're playing things different that other people aren't playing in ways. So I think, again, that's good. If it's mono or stereo, somebody out there will play stereo, whereas someone else will play mono. This is all good.
Yeah,
that's not very culty of
you, John. Apparently, I am going against the grain of my cult status. But here we go. Here's my card. Here's my card.
So how many of these cults do you think qualified for authoritarianism without accountability? I think it's just the cult of personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's the only one that can qualify. Zero tolerance for criticism or questions. All of them.
Oh, yeah.
I think all of them. Let's see. Unreasonable fears about the outside world or like other things. I think some of them are kind of. I think 2-band people are suspicious of digital.
Yeah, that's the gatekeepy.
Some of them.
Yeah, that's the gatekeepy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. A belief that former followers are always wrong. I think a lot of them. I think if you're a 2-band person, you go digital, you're going to get pushed back from like your old 2-band friends.
Yeah, now you're wrong. You were right before,
shit,
but now you're wrong. Yeah.
You're right before.
Now you're an outsider.
Bit of an exit cost.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be like a true exit cost, but like there's a tiny little one. Abuse of members, I think that probably mostly literally can potentially occur with a cult of personality. I'm not saying that it actively does right now, but it's a possibility.
For sure.
That's not to say guitarists aren't constantly abusing each other.
Oh, yeah.
Emotionally, psychologically, psychological abuse. People can be mean to each other.
Yeah, some people go like roast my board. They asked for it. I don't get that.
Yeah. Records, books, articles, or programs documenting the abuses of the leader or group. I mean, there are some studies documenting that things like Tonwood might not be true.
Right.
And so I give that one a soft, like, 1 or 2 of them. Followers feeling they are never able to be good enough. All of them.
Yes. Oh.
That's such a big thing in guitar culture, is that there's always something else.
Yep.
Always someone better or someone worse. Like it's everywhere. There's such a wide breadth of players that it's just across the spectrum. Like,
Yeah. A belief the leader is right at all times. Most literally the cult of personality ones, but I'm sure there are people who are louder about stereo effects and tube amps than others.
Sure.
But I don't know if they have followings. Like, is there a YouTube channel just dedicated to, like, tube amps are the best and you need to know everything about them?
I hope not.
There's
well, you know what? Someone tell us in the comments.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, tell us.
Please. And then, let's see. There was one other from The Atlantic. Opposing critical thinking. If you're hard on any of these, if you're like hard in on any of these groups and you oppose critical thinking or questions, then yeah, that's culty.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
So, I mean, I think we can just kind of bask in the fact that guitar culture is a little bit culty. And a lot of the responses that I got were just like everything about guitar culture is culty.
Oh, really? People were saying that?
All everything. Gaps.
Oh, yeah. There were a few that said,
all of it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Literally. Yeah. Cool. So with that, Hondo, where can people find you, talk to you, learn more about you?
I am on YouTube as Hondo Felder Music and also on Instagram as Hondo Felder. And I have a Discord, and the links will, if you go to any of those, my Discord links will be in there. Discord's pretty fun. And I am also very rarely on Twitch and almost never on TikTok, but kind of occasionally. So
you're not as chronically online as some of us.
I try not to be. That's like my big thing going into the next year, is trying to, like, you know, not be chronically online. So
every year I try. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Joe, is there anything else you wanted to say before we zippity doo dah on out of here? I regretted that immediately.
No. I think we covered all the basis of things that kind of lend themselves to gear culture being culty in very many ways. You know, the abusiveness being more of the gatekeeping, and pervasiveness of people having certain attitudes and outing anybody that has anything different to say. Gear worship, as far as they can do no wrong, and whatever they choose as far as tone or effects or whatever is the be-all, end-all, and there's no wiggle room for self-expression. Yeah, if you deviate from any of that, you're no longer one of us. You are outcasted. You are shunned. You know,
shun the non-believer.
Shame, ding ding, shame. Exactly. So yeah, I definitely do think a lot of gear culture can be at times. But I do appreciate those people that, you know, counter that and try to have an open mind and, you know, even Gil kind of personality when it comes to, you know, effects of gear and guitars and everything.
Well put. I just was thinking that we didn't touch on the cult of offset guitars. I remember some people did submit that.
Oh, nice.
That's just because they're better guitars. Oh, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening and understanding and everything.
Until next time, my name is Emily.
I'm Jonah Parr.
And I'm Hondo.
Goodbye. Bye-bye. Yeah.